Welcome, everyone, to the Orbit Football Podcast. We're going to go ahead and do our Week 6 recap of the college football slate. Talking about the college football slate, we had an absolute barn burner at the noon kickoff. Red River ends 34-30. Oklahoma takes Texas down. Go ahead and break this one down for me. I only got to watch a little bit of the first half of most of the noon slates as I actually got called into work kind of on the fly, so I didn't really get to watch a lot of college football, I will say. So this is going to be a Cade-heavy episode. So, Cade, what do you think of Red River?
Yeah, like you said, it's going to be kind of a me heavy episode. I'll say this: this was probably the first weekend this year that I got to sit down and watch. This is probably the most football I've watched this entire year. Obviously, I've kept up with the big games, but I was on it this weekend. I had the multi-screen going, I had everything going, and I had it going for this ball game more so in the second half. Like you said, you caught more of the first half of this game, but I'm going to, like you said, jumping right into it, 34-30, Oklahoma over Texas. And, I mean, this game went down to the wire. Like you said, it was an absolute banger. We both picked Texas in this game, including Blake, our guest picker, picked Texas as well. And all three of us got it wrong. It was Oklahoma in the end, and it was kind of because of the reasons that we talked about, that we hinted on in our preview. And it was that Oklahoma needed to force mistakes from Texas, and that's what happened. Obviously, turnover differential this ball game: Oklahoma 0, Texas 3, and that was a big thing that happened, and that's why it ended up swinging the way of Oklahoma in the end, is because they just they took advantage of those turnovers, and it came right out the gate. At the beginning of the ball game, Quinn Ewers, I believe it was either the first or second pass that he dropped back for interception. It was picked off by Oklahoma, so they get the ball and they, easily convert with that. They're up 7-0, and then like 2 drives later, Oklahoma gets the ball back in the shadow of their own end zone, and we get a blocked punt. So that just kind of showed how crazy this game was going to be within even the first 5 minutes and change of the ball game that we were looking at. Yeah, it took Texas 2 plays, and then it was the interception from Ewers, and then it took Oklahoma a 5-play touchdown, and then the other interception that I'll hint on a little bit later. And then the block punt touchdown for Texas, all within, I believe, the Texas touchdown came with 9:02 left to go in the first. So, first 6 minutes of the ball game, absolute chaos, like it usually is down at the Texas State Fair there, the Cotton Bowl. Anytime these teams meet, it's always a good game, and it was exactly that, like you said. But both of these teams were very evenly matched, and I will say that the box score does kind of favor Texas when you look at the yards, but obviously the turnovers kind of help Oklahoma a bit, and for a majority of this ball game, it kind of looked like it was swaying in Oklahoma's favor. Obviously, the 3 turnovers that I mentioned, all being from Ewers, and when you look at that a little bit deeper from Ewers, is that obviously the first turnover was a bad pass, undercut route by the defensive back of Oklahoma early on in the ball game. The second turnover, down in the red zone at really the goal line, tipped up into the air, should have been a caught pass, touchdown at least down to the 1, and it ends up into the hands of the Oklahoma defense. And they take over, and that leads to the punt block touchdown, which they're not able to convert on, but still. Texas gets points out of it somehow, and then the other one was the Ewers fumble, which he just kind of got caught in the wrong situation, got tackled in the right position, and ball pops free, and it's picked up by Oklahoma. But those 3 turnovers really kind of came back to burn Texas in this ball game, and that's why Oklahoma was able to win. Obviously, like I said, with the turnovers, but it was just Oklahoma's defense and the physicality. Brent Venables has done a fantastic job with this team in about a year. This team a year ago in this matchup had 1 loss. It came right at that Kansas game. It wasn't really the start of the downfall of that team or really the decline of that team last year, but it really cemented the direction that team was going. And they really weren't able to turn it around. And I believe finished the season either 6-7 or 7-6 when you looked at their bowl record, but it wasn't the greatest of years for Oklahoma. But Venables kind of showed why he's such a good coach. He showed very similar flashes of what he did as a DC at Clemson. Obviously, a lot of people talk about those Clemson teams of the the Brent Venables defense Clemson teams that won the national championships and such under Dabo Swinney. People say, oh, it's because of their quarterback play and their wide receiver play, because they had Deshaun Watson and they had Trevor Lawrence and they had Mike Williams. Justin Ross was there, so they had Hopkins a little bit earlier, but still they had all these players that are a plethora of NFL talent. But I personally think that they were able to win those games because of the defense. Those Brent Venable defenses were they were elite defenses, and I think that he kind of showed that, yeah, I'm still here, I'm still running the ship here at Oklahoma. We've turned things around. It was a little bit high scoring than you had it. I thought we were going to get some more offense. I thought it was going to be Texas's ball game by 2 scores because of Oklahoma mistakes, but Oklahoma played a clean ball game. And that goes back to what I say about the Oklahoma defense and forcing those mistakes. Obviously, the one turnover from Ewers was poor. And it ended up really resulting in an Oklahoma touchdown. But that touchdown, those points are really the difference of the ball game. That's the one that I truly think was Ewers' fault, because those were the only points scored off a turnover all day when you really looked at it. That was it. So, and that's the difference of the ball game, is that touchdown. And it came right out the gate, and it gave Oklahoma the momentum, and they were leading by 10 for a majority for a good bit of the second half. They were leading by multiple scores. Looked like it was going to be all of them because of how physical they were. When you looked at this team and how they really put themselves in position. Obviously, I want to talk about the goal line stand. That goal line stand was quintessential in the ball game. Obviously. It didn't equate in any Oklahoma points. It equated in a missed field goal. But Oklahoma was up 27-20, and Texas had a chance to tie the game with, I believe, what was it? It was early in the fourth quarter. It was 11:30 left to go in the fourth quarter is when the possession ended. But Texas gets down to the OU 1-yard line. 4 plays, first and goal from the 1. Cannot punch it in on those 4 plays. And they try, a little screen route to Xavier Worthy at the 1-yard line on 4th and goal, and he can't punch it in. He's just centimeters short of getting the ball over the goal line. And, that to me, that play stands out to me because that was really the game for me. Because that showed me that Oklahoma was able to sit there and be physical with Texas. Obviously, like I said, they were up by 10 in the ball game and looked like they could extend it, but Texas comes back, scores 13 unanswered, takes the lead. They march downfield late in the game. Quinn Ewers, great drive downfield. They kick a field goal from 47 yards with 1:17 left to go in the fourth, and then Dylan Gabriel just goes absolutely ballistic on the next drive, hits Drake Stoops twice for some big gains, gets a bad pass interference penalty, not bad in the sense that it was a bad call, but just a non-necessary penalty that Texas needed to do. Bleed clock, 2nd and goal from the 3, wide open in the back of the end zone's Nick Anderson, and Dylan Gabriel and company walk out of Dallas with a victory. But my final point I really want to talk about this game is Texas. And Oklahoma, obviously, great win for them. They've, a lot of people are saying these teams will probably meet again, and I think it's a possibility. It's a pretty decent possibility looking at the schedules remaining of both of these teams. I believe currently teams ranked, by the AP standards in the top 25, and really our top 25s. I think we only have both of these teams facing Oklahoma facing one team in the top 25 and Texas facing none, even by our top 25 standards. So, that's an important thing to look at moving forward. But Texas, you got to convert in the red zone. You got to convert when it matters most, and you got to get those points. And that's, that it kind of bit them in the Alabama game where they settled for field goals, but they were able to create mistakes, and that's what really led to them winning that ball game. But it was opposite of this game. Oklahoma was able to convert on the Texas mistakes, and that's why they looked for success. Obviously, both of these teams, 2 very good ball clubs, 2 teams that both you and I still respectively have in our, top 8s, top 9, top 10s, which we'll get to obviously at the end of our show today. But, it was a fantastic ball game. Went down to the wire, and I think the more physical team is the one that came out with the victory in Oklahoma, though.
Yeah, and I didn't get to watch the second half, but I did watch condensed highlights for just about every game that we do cover. And my biggest thing going into the game was I thought Dylan Gabriel was going to have to be an absolute gamer at quarterback, and he was. He was fantastic for the Sooners. And also, another thing I did say is I thought they were going to have to run the ball, and they did run the ball pretty well, but most of that was through Dylan Gabriel. They had 201 rushing yards. He ended up having 113 of those, so that equates to roughly 5 yards a carry. But I mean, Dylan Gabriel really carried this Oklahoma offense. And my biggest takeaway with how the stats ended up, obviously I didn't get to watch the second half too much, so I can't, I don't have a definitive statement for what I want to say. But my biggest thing is I think this was probably the best game that you're going to get from Oklahoma, and I think this was just a sloppy game from Texas. When we go down to it, they had nine penalties, 3 turnovers, 1 for 3 in the red zone, compared to Oklahoma's 6 for 6 in the red zone, no turnovers, and just I think this was the best game you got from Oklahoma, and it was good enough to take down the Sooners in Red River. And obviously, when we go to Oklahoma, I mean, their schedule was pretty, I would say, pretty favorable. They have a bye week, and then they get UCF, Kansas, and after that it's kind of gets a little bit tougher. But who knows what West Virginia right now, they're undefeated in conference play, but we don't know what they'll be like at Oklahoma State. Obviously, that's going to be that seems like a close game every year, regardless of how bad or good a team is going to be. So one thing to look out for: Andrew Anthony, their leading receiver, out seems like for the season. That's going to be a big thing, but obviously you have a bye week, so you can get some routes cooking for some guys deeper down the depth chart. But going to the key 3:30 game in the SEC, Alabama beats Texas A&M 26-20. This game was pretty sloppy. It was kind of a dogfight, and Alabama took it. Seems like we're rolling into what seems like another year of SEC West dominance from the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, I feel like I don't know if dominance is the right word. I don't think dominance is the right word this year, because it's not like the Alabama teams of the past, where if it was a game like this and you're talking about like a 2012 to 2000, actually probably not even 2012, probably like 2014 to like 2020 Bama, they're going into this game and they're probably winning this game by like multiple touchdowns. And that to me is what I consider dominance. Obviously, I still think that they could end up winning the West. I think obviously from now here on out they're the favorites in the West, but I don't know if they'll dominate the West like they have in the past. But obviously it's still their division. They're still top dog out there. They're still Saban's still kicking it. That defense is scary. Alabama has figured it out this year with the way that their defense has gone. There's a couple holes which I'll get on in this game, but now to really go in depth of the game at hand. But this game kind of felt like whoever was going to win this was going to be on a good positive trajectory to put themselves in the driver's seat to win the West. I think that's more what I get out of this game, is that Alabama's put themselves in the driver's seat to win the West, because they've already defeated Ole Miss, they've already defeated A&M, and really the only two, tough, I guess, games you could say they have left is LSU at home, after the way that game ended last year, and then, Iron Bowl. Those are really, obviously every game is going to be tough in the SEC, but I think those will be their toughest, remaining and looking at the schedule. But this game, I watched this game front to back. It had my full undivided attention in the second half of the game. It had most of my attention for the first half of the game. I was kind of switching through some other games that got out of hand pretty quickly. But this game, obviously, very evenly matched ball game. Texas A&M's defense got to Alabama in the first half. I believe Milroe was sacked 5 times in the first half. I think it was 6 total in the ball game. A&M was they were swarming to the ball. and they looked like it was gonna be them, and they were having momentum in this game. Obviously, that receiving core, whew, they're causing some fits. Evan Stewart, Anais Smith, Moose Muhammad, all of them. Not to mention Jake Johnson, the tight end. All of them were having fantastic ball games. They were running drag routes, they were running deep routes, they were running corner routes. Really, a lot of the routes that the receivers ran to get themselves open were those drag routes. That's really about it, is that they would just kind of run those drag routes over the middle, whether it be 5 yards drag slants, 5 yards, 10 yards to, Muhammad and Anais Smith. And they just take it. They would be getting chunk plays, left, right, and center, and it drove them down. Drove them downfield and put them in good situations. And then they found Jake Johnson open for major plays, and that really got them to the lead that they had at halftime. And Bama, this game kind of mirrored the Ole Miss game in a way. I don't think it was as dominant of a second half that Alabama had as they did in that Ole Miss game, but it was still a very, very good showing from Alabama in that second half. Texas A&M only got a field goal all second half, and Bama for a while scored, I believe it was 16 unanswered points in that second half until the field goal late in the game, which I have a lot to say about, but I'll get to that. Anyways, Milroe played very good in this game. They did have 2 turnovers, obviously the one interception, but it didn't really come back to bite him. But Jalen Milroe played very good. And the one way that I thought that Alabama could really pick apart this Texas A&M team was the same way that Miami had picked apart this Texas A&M team just a few weeks ago, and that was with the deep ball. And that's what Alabama did. Jermaine Burton, welcome to the party, folks. Jermaine Burton really stepped up and reintroduced himself to the college football landscape, had a fantastic game. 9 catches, 197 yards, 2 tutties through the air, just left, right, and center. They were throwing the ball up to him, and this kid was just coming down with it. And there was not much else you could really say. Bama, every single one of their touchdowns that were every single one of their touchdowns were passing touchdowns from Milroe, and they were 15-plus yards. Obviously, the first one early in the second quarter to Isaiah Bond, that was 52 yards, and the others were about 15, 20 yards, both to Jermaine Burton in the back of the end zone that he caught. And that's, when you have a guy like that, that's the one thing that had me really, really concerned about this Bama team was going into the season more so than now was who's going to step up in the wide receiving core. And I think Burton kind of put himself front and center in this ball game, and that's a good thing for Bama because they need that. They need a guy that they can rely on, and it was a good thing to see for him to have a good game. But this game, now I got to get to really the talking points of this game, and that's with Texas A&M. Second half, like I said, it was Bama's game. It really was. Texas A&M had struggles moving the ball. Both teams really struggled all day to run the ball. I think both teams were held under. I want to say both teams might have been held under 50 rush yards, maybe.
A&M had 67. Alabama, if you take away the sack yards, they had roughly 55, but 23 was sack yards.
Okay. So still under 75 rush yards, for both teams when you looked at it. Like, they weren't able to run the ball. And it was
sorry to cut you off, but A&M rushed for 2 yards carry.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, exactly. Like, that's the point. Like, Bama's defense showed that, they're good, and so did A&M's defense. Obviously, like I said, the 6 total sacks in the game forced Alabama to work through the air, and they had success through the air because through the deep ball through Jermaine Burton. A&M, a lot of people were saying, Max Johnson's a backup quarterback. Max Johnson, this, that. Max Johnson had a great game. He kept a lot of plays alive for Texas A&M in the pocket because he had that awareness. He was able to sit there in the pocket, stand tall, and make throws when he needed to. Obviously, the biggest mistake in this ball game for A&M was that one turnover that Max Johnson had, because it came literally 2 plays after an interception, a very ugly interception at that, from Jalen Milroe. And A&M got the ball early in the second half, could have marched downfield and taken a 2-possession lead, which could have maybe swung the momentum in their favor and said, look, this is us. But Bama picks off Max Johnson 2 plays after A&M gets an interception of their own, and it burned them. Alabama goes on to score, ties the game, and A&M, when you look at their second half possessions, interception, punt, missed field goal, safety, field goal, like they were limited, and that just goes to show the Bama defense, but the Bama offensive line also kind of held up in that second half too. They gave Milroe more time, more presence in the pocket, and he was able to make those throws. But the biggest thing in this ball game, obviously, Jimbo Fisher. What are we doing with clock management? I mean, what are we doing with clock management in this ball game? So what happens is late in the ball game, Max Johnson has a safety, and it puts Alabama up 26-17. A&M forces a quick punt, and they get the ball back. They have to march downfield quickly, and they do so with like one play. They hit, I believe it was Aniyah Smith over the middle with a drag route, and he goes all the way down. It was initially ruled a touchdown, but they found his toe dragged out of bounds, and they called him out of bounds at 2. So A&M has first and goal from the 2 with, I want to look and see, first and goal at the 2 with 3:16 left to go in the fourth quarter. It takes them a full minute and 5 seconds for them to score a point in this situation. Mind you, they're down 2 scores here. They're down by 9. They need to score fast, and it doesn't happen. They have a holding penalty that moves them back on what would have been a touchdown on first and goal, I believe, or second and goal, one of the first 2 downs. They move back, and then on third and goal, they get right back where they were, but they stay in bounds with it, and it forces Jimbo Fisher to burn a timeout for some apparent reason. Personally, what I was saying, when they got down to the 2-yard line and I saw that they were out, I said, all right, first play, you got to take a shot at the end zone. If you don't get it in, you have to kick your field goal here. Because no matter what you're going to do, you're still down 2 scores. You need 2 scores in this situation. Obviously, your defense just forced a punt in the flash drive, so, roll with it. And instead, they burn a whole minute, and Jimbo wastes a timeout just to kick the field goal. You need those 3 timeouts in that situation. That's where you got to have awareness and say, get your field goal unit on the field quickly, because they got to work. And it was just really poor time management, because at the end of the game, A&M needed that timeout. It would have given them a chance to have the ball back again. Obviously, Bama gets the ball after an onside kick, and it looked like it was going to be, Texas A&M was going to get a sack and was going to get a chance to get the ball back. And poof, fantastic catch by Jace McClellan, plucks the ball off the ground, picks up the first down, and then Bama immediately right after throws an incomplete pass. And then they have a false start penalty. So even though they were ahead, all they had to do was really knee the ball. It was 2 minutes left. A&M had no more timeouts. All Bama had to do was knee the ball just at least 2 times and then do what they did to end the game on 4th down, which was just bleed clock for like 5 seconds and then throw the ball out of bounds. And obviously it worked out for Bama, and A&M probably wouldn't have had time to do anything, but you didn't need to make it as chaotic as it was at the end of your Bama. And obviously A&M, you could have played this game so much better, but like I said, Bama's in the driver's seat now, and they're looking to go back to Atlanta. That's where that's where it's looking right now. From Tuscaloosa to Atlanta is where that driver, the bus is going, and they have a really good shot to do that moving forward. But good tough win for them. Defense still one of the best in the country. They finally got this thing figured out, and A&M. I'm interested to see how they're going to bounce back.
Yeah, my biggest thing is that if you'd have told me heading into the game that Alabama was going to have 14 penalties compared to 4 from A&M, they were going to lose the turnover battle, and they were only going to rush for 23 yards, like there's no way Alabama would be able to win the game, and they did. And they were, from what I seen, they were in control for a lot of the game, down the stretch, and I think it just shows how good this Alabama defense is. I guess personnel did change, but from last year to this year, the personnel on field is not very much different, and it is a completely different Alabama defense on the field. They looked motivated, they looked really fast, they looked ready to play. And last year, Pete Golding, I don't know exactly what happened, but last year it looked like they didn't want to play football at all. This defense looks fantastic. The offense, if they're going to be able to throw the ball at the level that they did, if they can develop any bit of a run game, it feels, heading into this week, it's like, they haven't really developed a pass game at all. They've ran the ball semi decently, like nothing crazily, but they've gotten the job done on the ground, and now they could barely even run on A&M, which, to be fair, A&M does have a very good front seven defensive line specifically. I don't know, this Alabama team. I wouldn't say that they're going to peak here soon, but I think that over the next few weeks we're going to get a really good-looking Alabama Crimson Tide. But going to the 7:30 slate, I believe ABC game, Louisville. They handle Notre Dame with ease, 33-20, and that scoreline is a lot closer than how that game went. Louisville looked really good. I think both of you and I were off on that game, but Blake got it right. So, what did you see in Louisville? What did you see in Notre Dame? Obviously, Notre Dame has another big game this week, which we'll be covering on, I believe, Friday is when that will be coming out. So, what did you see from this game? Obviously, I didn't get to watch this game live at all. I didn't get to keep up with it. I ended up watching the condensed highlights. So, but I think your take is going to be a little bit better than mine. So, with that, I'll give the floor to you.
Yeah, I watched this game front to back. I like I said, very similar to like most of my day went in watching as much as I did this weekend. But I watched this game for the first half. I kind of flipped between this one. I kept an eye on the other games that were going around the country, like the Michigan game a little bit, and whatever. I believe there's another game that was in that late slate that was somewhat intriguing to me that I kept an eye on, but this got my full attention in the second half. And the biggest thing that I saw this game was that Louisville ran the ball down Notre Dame's throat. And I mean down their throat. 185 rush yards as a team. And Notre Dame's bread and butter, obviously they couldn't really run the ball because they were down for almost all of this game. They only had 44 rush yards if you include sack yardage. Even if you take away Louisville's sack yardage, they're close to 200 even. They're really close to 200 even, actually. I think they're 199 with taking away sack yardage, but they ran all over Notre Dame all night long, and they didn't have an answer for it. They were just finding big holes. They were picking up big plays. I mean, they averaged, 4.5 yards per carry. They were getting good yardage each play on Notre Dame, and Notre Dame, prides itself on being able to stop the run because they're that physical football team, and they weren't able to do that against Louisville. And obviously, Louisville, big environment for them, very similar. I think that this game, because I know we both watched the Duke game a week ago, and we kind of sat there and we said Duke kind of should have won this game. Duke outplayed Notre Dame in this game. This Louisville game, same exact way it played out. The only difference is Louisville didn't make those mistakes. Notre Dame made those mistakes. Louisville didn't turn the ball over 3 times like Duke did. Louisville kept it clean. And that's the reason why they came out on top, is because they kept it clean and stuck to their guns. But it was all Louisville in that second half. Notre Dame really couldn't get anything working offensively. They could not run the ball. Estime only had, 2 yards a carry, 10 carries, 20 yards, and as long as 6 all night, that's a problem. But Notre Dame, the big concern I have about this is the biggest concern I've had about this team all season. They're built like a very solid ball club, but the talent, the peak, the ceiling of this team is kind of showing itself. This team does not have as high of a ceiling as other teams do. They have a pretty high floor, I'll say that. But obviously, you're an independent. You got to go play, and you have these ties at the ACC. You got to play a pretty tough schedule. And the 4 weeks that they're currently in, they wrap up this weekend against USC. That's tough, and it only gets they still got some tough games continuing. They haven't had a bye yet. They've started since week 0. They've gone on the road 2 weeks in a row for really the biggest games in Duke's probably program history, and Louisville their biggest game since Lamar Jackson was playing football there. And then they got They had to host Ohio State when they lost on a heartbreaking game, and then they got to host USC next weekend. Like, it doesn't get easier for Notre Dame, and that's what you put your situation in. But I think because of, like I said, I don't think the ceiling is as high for this team is because of the talent on this team. It is evident their wide receiving core is not going to get things done. Sam Hartman ended up with 3 interceptions today, or 3 interceptions in the game, but a lot of that was due to his inability to really connect with anybody besides their tight end, Evans. Evans was, once again, similar to the Ohio State game, similar to the Duke game, was the guy that really led the way. I mean, he was their leading receiver again with 4 receptions, for 71 yards and a touchdown. They don't have anybody who can step up in their receiving core, and that's an issue. And it's going to cost them some games. It's going to cost them this game against Louisville, because if you shut down their run game, they're not going to be able to do anything. I mean, say what you want about Sam Hartman, but he can only do so much. Two touchdowns to 3 interceptions is not good. And he had a couple really bad reads on some of those interceptions, but. That's the biggest issue I see from Notre Dame, is that it's showing of how, I don't want to say low the ceiling is, but how Notre Dame can't be, and I want to say this, Notre Dame cannot be an elite team this year, but they can be a pretty darn good team this year. And I think this game really encompasses that altogether.
Yeah, I don't really have too much to add, because I don't want to say something that is not right, because obviously I did not watch this game. So we're gonna go ahead and jump into the next game. LSU beats Missouri in a shootout, 49-39. Missouri falls for the first time this year. LSU gets a much needed conference win. I think that this game is kind of how I expected it to go. Off the top of my head, I cannot remember the exact score that I had, but I'm pretty sure I had it pretty high scoring. But LSU, they get it done. They needed this one bad, really bad. The offense looked good once again. The defense looked shaky once again. It seems like this is going to just be the LSU team that we have. And the big thing that LSU capitalized on is turnovers. Brady Cook, 1 pick six and another interception, I believe, at the end of the game, if I'm not mistaken.
The pick six was at the end of the game. The other interception, I believe, was like dead in the middle of the game is when the other interception was.
Yeah, because that was the Harold Perkins interception. So
correct.
But yeah, LSU, if they're going to get a defensive touchdown, that's definitely going to help them a lot, because I don't know if I expected anything positive for their defense to happen for the rest of the season. But 49-39, do you have any thoughts on this game? I know this is kind of we're going to go over this a little bit quicker than some of the games that we've hit. But I don't know. This is the same LSU team to me. How about you?
Yeah, I agree. It's the same LSU team for me. You were talking about score predictions. You had it 33-26. I had it 49-41. I was pretty darn close with that one. But like you said, this is LSU. This is the team that we're gonna get. We're gonna get a team that's got an elite offense, maybe the best in the country. It can be debated, but elite offense and a awful defense. And it's only gonna get them so far. Obviously, they're a very fun team to watch. They're gonna be entertaining to watch, and part of that reason is because of a man who. I think I'm the number one, maybe besides Robert Griffin III. I think I might be the second favorite on this guy's list, and that's Jaden Daniels. I mean, I've loved this kid ever since he played at Arizona State as a freshman there under Herm. I've loved him when he's got at LSU this year. I mean, he's looked good this year, man. Like he's one of, if not the best, and I will say that personally, players in all of college football this year. He's having a fantastic year, but yeah, it's only going to get you so far for LSU. Missouri, obviously they still got Luther Burden. Luther Burden's had a great year. He had a great game. He did what he needed to do, and obviously he should have against that secondary of LSU. But LSU, they got the bounce back win that they needed. The biggest thing that I do see about this team that I'll hit on here for my final point is that they, when you look at their schedule, they only got one more road game, and it's their biggest game of the season. It's at Bama. That game that's their chance to win the West. And we'll see if they have a chance to do that and capitalize on that against Bama, because Bama is the only team that's currently undefeated in the West. But they host everybody else at home. I mean, Auburn this weekend, Army, a good, team that's an independent. That'll be interesting to keep an eye on. Florida, Georgia State, a good group of 5 team. And obviously they wrap things down against Texas A&M, who we think is very good. But LSU, if they could somehow just get, I don't know, maybe just a little better with their defense, I think that they could do something. But, they're just going to be they're going to be an LSU team. Very entertaining, but they're not going to be able probably to just kind of be that elite team. They're just going to be a good team that's fun to watch this year.
Yeah, and heading to another SEC game that was pretty hyped up, and in about a quarter of football, this game was pretty much over with. Georgia 51-13, Kentucky. I mean, this Georgia team, they were back home and they were ready to play, that's for sure. They scored, I believe, on their first 6 out of 8 possessions. They scored first 3 possessions were a touchdown. So, this was a Kentucky team that obviously got a win against Florida. I think everyone out of us that picked Georgia like pretty handedly, but I don't think we were thinking it was going to be this bad. This Kentucky defense looked horrible, to say the least, and Kentucky, they just were not able to run the ball. That's really all I got. Devin Leary, I mean, didn't have another bad day for him. It just hasn't really worked at Kentucky for him like it did at NC State. I don't know. That's kind of all I have. Do you have anything different to add to this game? I know it was a pretty bad beatdown.
Not much. Now that I'm thinking of what other game was in the nightcap, it was this one, and I couldn't remember it because I didn't watch I watched it, but I didn't watch it. If you understand what I'm saying, like I knew early this was Georgia's game. Georgia's good. I think we both kind of, like you said, we thought Georgia was going to win handily, but not this big. This was a beatdown. And this just goes to show Georgia's good. They're still here. And they're going to be here for a minute. Kirby Smart has this program right where it needs to. They're the crown jewel of college football now. And a win like this, we've been kind of waiting for Georgia to have that game where they kind of turn it on. They turned it on this weekend, and they did it in a good fashion at home against a ranked opponent. No better way to do it. Showed out in front of the country. Still proved, hey, we're still around. Don't worry about us.
Yeah, and the thing about me is this was the kind of win that they needed. Obviously, when they were playing against their group of 5 teams or FCS opponents, they were winning handedly, but they never got off to a quick start this year. And I mean, when they scored on the first 5 possessions of the game, touchdown or field goal, that just proves that they can turn it on whenever they want to. I think last year we seen it after the Mizzou game. They kind of turned it on. They kind of sleptwalked into that game, but they turned it on from there and were national, title contenders. And I think they sputtered a little bit with the South Carolina game, and then we see it with the Auburn game, and it's like, man, is this Georgia team? Are they really that good? Are they going to fall off, from last year? And while they might not be as good as they were last year, they're one of the best teams in the country still, regardless of, maybe the teams, last year were a little bit better than the teams this year, but who cares? We don't care about is the team better last year. All we care about is our team at the top of, the college football landscape this year, and they are, and they showed it. They dismantle Kentucky, but going to a fun game that I think Blake and I picked this game. You picked the right one. We picked the wrong one. UCLA 25-17 over Wazoo. They finally fall. And this was a game where UCLA defense came in handy. And this was, when I picked, I thought UCLA was going to win this game, but I wanted to pick Washington State because I picked against them, I believe, twice when we've picked them. Actually, no, I picked against them once. I believe I picked Oregon State. I did pick Washington State to beat Wisconsin, but I don't know. This Washington State team, I did not want to pick against them because I think they're a team that can really beat almost anyone they play, but they could also lose to anyone they play. So I'm interested to see how the rest of their season goes. They get Arizona this week, which Arizona, obviously, they lost to USC, but they played pretty close with them. So I don't know. This Washington State team is they're interesting because they get Oregon, and then they get Arizona State, Stanford, Cal, Colorado, and then they go at Washington. So, if they could spring an upset against either Washington or Oregon and go spotless, we could be talking about a Cougar team playing, I believe, at in the Pac-12 championship. They're good offense, but UCLA's defense, man, they were really good in this one.
Yeah, they were. Honestly, it wasn't really a good game from either of the quarterbacks, and Dante Moore or Cam Ward. It was more so UCLA really dominated this game. The box score is going to show it, and the game really showed it. Really, the only reason why this game was probably as close as it was because of the pick six right before halftime that Dante Moore threw, where UCLA was marching downfield and was going to score before half, but then it was a pick six in Washington State's favor that put them up at halftime, 10-9. But Carson Steele, our guy, what a fantastic game for him. 141 yards on 30 carries, 4.7 yards a pop. No touchdowns, funny enough, but he's our guy, Ball State transfer. We kind of saw him a little bit last year, being guys that have a little bit, based out in MAC country. But Washington State, this is really the final thing I have to say on this game. You talk about maybe upset and springing an upset, being spotless in one of those games. They're gonna have to run the ball to do it. I mean, as a team, when you don't count sack yardage, they had 24 rush yards. That's a problem. And this game ended a one-score game. That is an issue. Like, you can't do that. And we're gonna have to see how that plays out the rest of the year. But that's not a good sign if you're Washington State, is that they just still haven't got the run game going this year.
Yeah, and when I talk about them playing Arizona this week, we saw Arizona in action late against USC, 43-41, triple overtime. My biggest takeaway from this game is the NCAA. What are we doing here in overtime? This is a joke. But going to the actual game action, USC, they just, it was the first week of conference play, whatever. They kind of sleptwalk into it. Then they get the Colorado game, and, they're up almost, 3-4 touchdowns. Then they win by a touchdown, and, it's an onside kick with, 50 seconds left. And then they come into this Arizona game, and, Arizona's up 17-0, I think, in the second quarter at some point. And
yes, it's
like this USC team, when does Lincoln Riley realize that he's, we can talk about his recruiting of offense, defense, the split of it, but there's always been one guy at the helm of his defense, and that's Alex Grinch. And my problem is my thought is, what does Alex Grinch have on Lincoln Riley to still have a job? It was at Oklahoma, it's at USC still, and the defense looked good in the first few weeks, and then they get to the, conference play part, and it's like, what's happening here? The offense is still great. The least amount of points they put up in a game this year is 42. But when we're talking about we're letting up 28, 28 again, 41, 41, it's like at some point, Lincoln Riley, he's been asked multiple times this year, and after the Arizona game, he was asked about, does he still believe in Alex Grinch to be the defensive coordinator for the University of Southern Cal? And in one answer, in one word, he just says, yep. And it's like, at some point, Alex Grinch has to just not be here or not at least call the defensive part of the game. That's my biggest takeaway from USC. Obviously, they get it done without Zachariah Branch, which is big, and we're gonna have to see how that looks against Notre Dame. Which Notre Dame, obviously, maybe they did get boat raced, but I think if the Notre Dame offense has success against this USC defense, which they should be able to run the ball pretty effectively, the offense. If Notre Dame can put up 30 points, I don't know if USC is going to be able to reach that high 40 mark to win. So I think it's going to be an interesting matchup. But and no disrespect to the Arizona quarterback, but that's not the starter. Jayden de Laura did not play this game. He didn't play the week before. Jayden de Laura's hurt. So I mean, this is a backup quarterback putting up 41 in triple overtime, but still it's a worry for me. And I know I dropped them down. I know you dropped them down. You dropped them down a little bit more than me, but this USC team, they're gonna have to figure it out soon defensively. And this isn't even the Notre Dame game is hard. Then you go to Utah, and then the last 3 weeks of that schedule: Washington, Oregon, and UCLA.
They host Utah this year.
Yeah,
they host Utah.
But, yes, still, but then you get Washington, Oregon, and UCLA to end your season, and good luck with that. That's all I can say for the USC team.
Yeah, I mean, it's a Lincoln Riley football team. I said this last week. I'm gonna say it again. It's a Lincoln Riley football team. There's not much more that needs to be said. They're going to have an elite offense, and their defense is subpar. And nothing's going to change. And that's the reason why I was that's the reason why I had this team 10-2 in our preseason, and that's the reason why that might be too much for this team, honestly, because like you said, they got to travel to Notre Dame. They still got to play Utah, who's probably the best defense in the Pac-12. Granted, I know that game's at home, but Utah's beat them twice last year. And both, the one game at home in the regular season was close. Both games were really close, but they just grinded out those victories. Then they got to play Washington, like you said. Then they got to play UCLA, who's another probably top 3, top 2 defense in the Pac-12, and travel to Autzen. It's not going to get easier. It's going to get only tougher. And going into that back half of your season, and you have a 43-41 triple overtime victory over Arizona, that's concerning. It's very concerning for USC.
Yeah. Going to our last overall game that we're going to go and cover, and it's really not even a game that we're going to cover. It's going to be the last minute of a football game, and I think everyone knows what game we're talking about. Georgia Tech beats Miami. Miami no longer undefeated in Hard Rock, and what in the world happened? The worst part about this is not even the first time it's happened for Mario Cristobal. Nope. I don't know exactly how much time was on the clock, but Georgia Tech out of timeouts, and Miami just runs the ball, and they fumble in Georgia Tech territory. Once again, not for sure exactly where the fumble happened, but I know it was on their side of the field, and it gives Georgia Tech, it gives Georgia Tech the ball with under a minute left, and on the very last, well, not the very last play, but with about 1 second, a wide open receiver just goes into the end zone, beats the entire Miami defense. Brutal is probably the best way you could describe it. And the problem is that we can talk about Miami losing this game in horrible fashion and firing Mario Cristobal, but the problem is this team was, sure, if they win this game 20-16 or whatever it was, we don't even have this discussion. And yes, it is a horrible play, horrible. It's probably one of the worst plays of the season, if not the worst. And there's been some pretty bad ones out there. So, but I don't know. It's this program is looking up for one part. This team that's playing on the field is a lot of underclassmen, and they were 5-0 or 4-0, whatever one it was. I can't remember if they had a bye week or whatever, but just a really ugly loss. At the point, if they got the win, it would have been like, okay, whatever. It was an ugly win, but a win is a win at that point. It's conference play too. Georgia Tech, they lost to Bowling Green last week, but this is the kind of game where they're gonna give their best effort because they're after the lowest, and we're gonna get a different Georgia Tech team, and I don't know, they got it done in what should have been a loss for them, but you put yourself in position, you don't, you line up and play the snap, and you play what they give you, and I don't know, they got a fumble and they got the ball and they scored a touchdown, which. Once again, even though they got the fumble, they still have to score the touchdown, and they did. So Georgia Tech did their part, and they took advantage of an absolute blunder. I don't really have anything else to add. Do you have anything different to add to the game?
I don't really have anything much else to add except Miami just kind of should have won this ball game. When you look at the rest of the ball game, obviously the box score doesn't tell it all, but they outgained Georgia Tech by 200 yards. But they had 5 turnovers, including that fumble, compared to Georgia Tech's 2. I mean, when I looked, I saw that this score was, I believe it was like 17-10 heading into the fourth quarter, and I watched the entirety of this fourth quarter of the game, and Miami came back and got out to a lead, and then I just kind of glanced over, and I was like, oh my goodness, they just fumbled the football. And then I just saw Haynes King throwing a dot downfield, and that was the game. Like, I don't know, man. Like, it's Miami. It's something Miami would do. Like, I don't know. Like you said, it's not the first time Cristobal's been in a situation like this. He's had blunders like this before, but I don't know. They're still a good team. They're still a very talented team, but to have a devastating loss like that and then have to turn around and go on the road to UNC next week, well, heading into this week, actually, like, that doesn't get any tougher. Like, doesn't get any tougher than that.
Right, and we're gonna go ahead and hit on 2 more teams. Not really talk about the game, but talk about the teams and the program surrounding it. I'll take the first one. You can take the second one on the list. Michigan, they destroy Minnesota at Minnesota. This team looks really good. They're hitting form. This is kind of what I wanted to see. I dropped them going into conference play, especially after the Rutgers game. Just wanted to see them turn it on, and the last 2 weeks they have turned it on. Yes, against 2 horrible offenses in Minnesota and Nebraska, but I mean, they're doing what they're doing, and I don't know if many people will listen to the PJ Fleck press conference, but he said it's probably one of the best teams he's ever played, if not the best team he's ever played as a head coach. So I think that's pretty big praise to Big Blue. And I'll let you take the second team.
Yeah, so I just kind of said North Carolina, and North Carolina, boy, they had a big win over Syracuse this weekend. I know it was kind of on our slate because we hadn't really talked about North Carolina in a while because they just kind of haven't had a game worth talking about. And I mean, they thumped Syracuse from the get-go. I mean, they were just on Syracuse in this game, won 40-7. We all had this game, North Carolina. I was the one that was none of us had it this big, and somehow I was the one that was closest. I think I had 42-14. But, I mean, they just dominated Syracuse, and Syracuse isn't even a bad team. But I think it just goes to show, obviously the big thing for North Carolina, Tez Walker's back. He finally got reinstated. Thank you, NCAA, for doing that.
Great work
finally
there,
got reinstated by the NCAA. Yeah, took them long enough, but got to play this weekend, and that offense, man, like Drake May finally kind of had that game where he was like, yeah, I'm still out here and I'm still working. And North Carolina, they're still a team that's gonna make some noise this year. Obviously, Miami this week, but there's some games down the line that we're gonna have to keep an eye on the Tar Heels this year. Obviously the biggest ones, they've got Miami circled this weekend, and then they've got Duke, obviously big one there, and then at Clemson. If they can probably get all 3 of those, or maybe even 2 of those, that might put them in a situation where they might be able to make the ACC championship, possibly win the ACC championship. But Heels, man, they look good.
Yeah, they do. And talking about the North Carolina Tar Heels, they're both in our top 25s. We're going to go and cover the full top 25s we have. I'm going to go and start with mine from 25 to 21. New to my list, and near to my heart, West Virginia. They are into the top 25 for me. Missouri falls down one spot to 23. Ole Miss 20, or Missouri 24, excuse me. Ole Miss 23. Washington State going to fall down to 22. Just got to develop a run game there. And LSU at 21.
Okay, so now to mine. I do. I'll preface by saying I do have 3 teams out. And the 3 teams out are Clemson. They're out just kind of because of who I put in. Miami with the loss. I still think they're a good team, but just after that and then having to turn around, like that's tough. That's tough for you to do. And then Kansas State, obviously they they had an interesting loss this weekend. Friday night they went to Stillwater and did not come out victorious, so they are bounced out of my top 25. But new to my poll at 25th. Maryland Terrapins. Obviously, they kind of kept it close with Ohio State in the first half of that game, but and Talua didn't have the best looking game, but I think they're a pretty solid team comparatively to maybe some other teams in the country. But I kind of liked a little bit of what I saw from Maryland and a little bit of that receiving core that they have got there. But they're new to my poll at 25. Even with the loss, they move in. 24 moving down. A little big time there is Washington State. They moved down to 24. 23, back reintroducing themselves into my poll as the Kansas Jayhawks. Big, kind of a big win for them over UCF this weekend at home. Offense still looks good. Bean was the quarterback too, and the offense looked good. Jalen Daniels was out of that game, but I mean, they still got a good team. And then 22, new to my poll for the first time this year, the Louisville Cardinals introduced themselves, had a great game over Notre Dame. And then 21 is Duke.
At 20, I have Texas A&M. 19 falling, I believe, from like 11 or 10 for me. Notre Dame. Miami at 18. Unfortunate loss, but I mean, I can't predict that kind of thing. I still think Miami would beat a lot of teams on a neutral field. So at 17, Louisville. They are new to my list as well. That pass rush is pretty wicked, and they got a pretty good running game. And, they got a star receiver in Jack Plummer. I mean, he's been in college football since 1984. So, and Clemson at 16 for me. I think that defense is looking pretty good.
Yeah, little jokes there with Jack Plummer. But at 20, moving down, I think all the way from 11, USC. Yes, they win, but this team, their defense, like, I don't know, and I'll probably get gripes from this for another team I have high, but for their defense, but just their defense. 19 is Missouri. Yes, they lose, but I still keep them in my top 25. I actually kind of move them up a little bit. 18 moving down from 10th for me is Notre Dame after the loss. Obviously, they didn't look good. Obviously, they have their issues, but they have a chance to bounce back this weekend. 17, defense on this team. Man, they're good. UCLA at 17. And then moving up this week with the loss all the way to 16 is Texas A&M for me.
My 15 spot goes to the Beavers of Oregon State. They were in a shootout with Cal. 14, you talked about their defense, UCLA for me. 13 is Utah. 12, I have USC falling down from, I believe, 9. And Florida State is going to be right outside my top 10 at 11.
So 15 for me is Ole Miss. They kind of stay the same this week. Same with the team above them. 14 is Utah. They stay the same. And really all these teams just kind of move up because of teams I move down. 13, I have it. I still have LSU there. Like I said, I think I'm outside of Robert Griffin III. I think I'm the highest on this team out of anybody in the country, just because of their offense. And maybe it's because I like to watch this team because it's fun. But that offense is good. Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr., Diggs had a good game this weekend, and obviously Jaden Daniels. Like I said a little bit earlier, he's my Heisman frontrunner. I love this kid. He's really fun to watch. Might be a little bit of bias there, but I like that team. I like that offense. But at 12, I have Oregon State. And finally moving up, I'm finally kind of buying into this team a little bit this year, is North Carolina. North Carolina moves up to 11 for me.
And speaking of North Carolina, I have them at 10 above Florida State. So for me, North Carolina is my best team in the ACC. 9, I have Penn State. 8, I have Alabama. 7, I have Oklahoma. Might seem a little low after their win, but like I said in our breakdown, I think that might have been the best Oklahoma team that we've seen. So I'm not going to jump on the gun too much, but they're in my top 10. And Washington is going to be at 6 for me.
So my number 10 is going to be Alabama. They move up into my top 10 for the first time early in the season. My number 9, interesting enough, I believe moving all the way down from my 2 spot, Texas. I moved them down because, we kind of sit there and we say, we do our rankings off of rankings, whatever you want to say it as, based off of who we think would win on a neutral field. And personally, for me, I saw it happen. I understand, Tyler's got a good point with what he says, that might have been the best Oklahoma performance we see this year, but they still beat Texas on a neutral field. It happens. So I moved Texas down to 9. Oklahoma moves up to 8. Washington goes to 7, and 6 is Florida State for me.
At 5, I have Oregon. 4, I have Ohio State falling down 1. Michigan jumping from 6 to 3. Really liking how they're looking. I have Texas at 2. Like you said, Oklahoma did beat them on a neutral field, but I don't know. I think of Texas. I mean, really, if Jatavion doesn't drop the pick, or even with how bad they played, they were still up with a minute left. So I don't know. I'm not gonna drop Texas too much yet. If they lose again, then they'll go down. But I'm at 1 spot. Georgia, they've been popping in and out of the 1 spot, and they're going to regain it this time.
At my 5, I have Oregon. They kind of move up a spot because of Texas falling out, but I still think that they're my top team in the Pac-12 right now. 4, Michigan. 3, Penn State, and 2, Ohio State. I move Ohio State down. But, I mean, those 3 teams, I think, personally to me, I think they're about on the same. From what I've seen, obviously, stylistically, one might be better than the other or so, but those 3 teams are still on a very high level, and I think the winner of the Big Ten is going to be my favorite for the college football champion or playoff champion this year. As of now, pending obviously we have the rest of the season to go, but as of now, I think they would be ahead. But my number 1 team, I think for the first time this year, I think they finally touched the number 1 spot. Georgia Bulldogs looked really good this week, but Georgia's my number 1.
All right, that is going to be it for our Week 6 recap. And one more thing I'm going to add. There's football on a Tuesday night. Thank you, Conference USA. I much appreciate it. I have Liberty, Jacksonville State on, so I've been thoroughly entertained during this podcast. But that's going to go ahead and wrap it up. So my name is Tyler Stevens, and for my co-host, Cade Williamson, we're going to be signing out on the Orbit Football Podcast.